Harold shuffled slowly into his kitchen as the first light of dawn crept through the thin curtains. At 78, each morning felt heavier than the last. The silence in the house echoed like a distant storm, the quiet that once felt peaceful when Martha was alive now felt like a cruel reminder that she was gone. He opened the cupboard and reached for his coffee mug, the same one Martha had given him on their 40th anniversary. It had a small chip on the rim, but he couldn't bear to throw it away. He filled it with strong, black coffee, hoping it would wake him up, shake him back into feeling alive. But today, even the smell seemed dull. Harold glanced at the clock. 6:15 a.m. In the old days, Martha would be humming in the kitchen, frying eggs, and slicing fruit. She always believed breakfast was the most important meal of the day. But now, Harold barely touched food in the mornings. It felt like too much effort, too much noise for his lonely world. Just as he settled into his creaky chair, there was a soft knock at the door. He frowned. No one usually visited this early. Shuffling to the door, he opened it and was met by a burst of energy. Lucy, the lively 9-year-old girl from next door, stood there grinning. "Good morning, Mr. Harold," she chirped, holding up a plate piled high with warm blueberry muffins. "Mama and I baked these last night, and she said you might like them for breakfast." Harold's eyes widened in surprise. He hadn't had a real breakfast in months, and the sweet smell of blueberries filled his senses, stirring something deep inside him. He hesitated, then took the plate, his hands trembling slightly. "Thank you, Lucy, that's very kind of you," he managed, his voice cracking. Lucy giggled. "You always tell me to eat my breakfast before school, remember? You should too." As she skipped away, Harold looked at the muffins, then back at his empty table. For the first time in a long while, he felt warmth spread through his chest, a tiny ember of connection flickering to life. Maybe breakfast wasn't just about food. Maybe it was about being remembered, about love showing up at your door when you least expected it. The next morning, Harold felt an unusual surge of determination as he finished Lucy's last blueberry muffin. He glanced out the window and noticed how the early sunlight danced on the dew-soaked grass. A gentle breeze rustled the maple tree leaves, and for a fleeting moment, he felt like he could step back into the world he once loved. He decided he would take a walk, something he hadn't dared in months. He ignored the stiffness in his knees and the small voice in his mind reminding him to move carefully. Without thinking, he slipped his feet into his worn-out slippers and stepped outside. The fresh morning air wrapped around him like an old friend, and he took a deep breath. "I can do this," he whispered to himself. As he shuffled down the cracked path toward his mailbox, he felt strangely alive, almost giddy. But the grass was still wet with morning dew, and his slippers had no grip. Suddenly, his foot slid forward, and before he could react, Harold crashed down onto the hard ground. Pain shot up his left side, sharp and unforgiving. He lay still, stunned and scared, staring up at the pale sky. From across the street, Mrs. Carter, Lucy's mother, noticed him on the ground. She ran over, panic in her eyes. "Oh my goodness! Harold, can you hear me?" "Hold on," she shouted, kneeling beside him. With trembling hands, she helped him sit up and leaned him gently against the old wooden bench near his garden. He winced as he moved, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Harold," she said firmly, brushing his forehead, "you mustn't walk outside without proper shoes or a cane. It's too dangerous. That's how serious falls happen." Her voice softened, and she squeezed his hand. "We care about you. You're not alone in this." Tears filled Harold's eyes, not just from the pain but from the realization that he had let pride and habit cloud his judgment. He looked into Mrs. Carter's kind, worried face and felt something shift inside him. In that vulnerable moment, he realized that caring for himself wasn't a burden on others, it was an act of love for the people who wanted him around. And maybe, just maybe, accepting help was braver than trying to do it all alone. A week after his fall, Harold found himself moving more cautiously around the house. He had promised Mrs. Carter he would be more careful, and he genuinely meant it. But old habits die hard. Each morning, he woke up feeling lightheaded, his head spinning slightly when he sat up too fast. He brushed it off as, just old age, and shuffled to the kitchen without taking a sip of water or checking his blood pressure. In his mind, these small discomforts were just a part of getting older, a nuisance he had learned to ignore. That Thursday morning, as the summer sun began to rise, Harold decided to water his wife's old rose bushes. Martha had adored those roses, tending them had become Harold's quiet way of keeping her memory alive. He grabbed the heavy watering can and stepped into the yard, sweat already forming on his brow. His hands trembled slightly, but he pushed forward, determined to care for the roses she had loved so dearly. Halfway through, a wave of dizziness washed over him. The world tilted violently, and his knees buckled. He dropped the watering can, water splashing over his slippers and the soil. He reached out desperately, but there was nothing to hold on to. For a terrifying moment, he thought this might be the end. His heart pounded in his chest like a frantic drumbeat. His breath came in shallow, ragged gasps, and he could barely keep his eyes open. Just then, Lucy appeared at the edge of the yard, skipping home from her piano lesson. She saw Harold collapse and her small face twisted in shock and fear. Without a second thought, she sprinted toward him and shouted for her mother. Within minutes, Mrs. Carter was there, dialing 911, holding Harold's hand, and reassuring him that help was on the way. Harold felt the warmth of Lucy's tiny hand squeezing his fingers, grounding him, reminding him he wasn't alone. At the hospital later that day, the doctor explained he had ignored the warning signs: dizziness, weakness, dehydration. Tears welled in Harold's eyes as he realized how close he had come to losing everything. In that sterile room, surrounded by beeping monitors and concerned faces, Harold felt a deep, humbling shift. He understood at last, taking care of his health wasn't just for him. It was an act of love for the people who needed him, and for the memories he still wanted to honor. Returning home from the hospital, Harold felt like he was seeing his house through new eyes. The once comforting quiet now felt alive with possibility, as if Martha's spirit was gently nudging him forward. The rose bushes looked brighter, the air felt sweeter, and every little sound, the chirping of birds, the creak of the porch swing, seemed to whisper, "You're still here. Make it count." The next morning, Harold made a promise to himself. He poured a glass of water before his coffee, took a slow, steady breath, and checked his blood pressure. For the first time in years, he prepared a real breakfast: scrambled eggs, whole wheat toast, and a bowl of fresh berries. When Lucy and Mrs. Carter stopped by to check on him, they found Harold waiting on the porch with an extra plate set out. "Join me," he called with a smile that seemed to light up the entire yard. They sat together, the summer sun warming their faces. Lucy giggled as she spread jam on her toast, while Mrs. Carter watched Harold with relief and quiet pride. Harold shared stories of Martha. How she loved blueberry muffins, how she used to dance around the kitchen singing old jazz tunes. He even shared some of his favorite quotes with Lucy, scribbling them on little cards for her to take home. One read, "Do not regret growing older. It is a privilege denied to many." Lucy read it aloud, her eyes wide with wonder, and hugged Harold tightly. As they finished breakfast, Harold stood up slowly but confidently, using his new cane. "I think today calls for a little gardening," he said. Lucy jumped up, offering to help him water the roses. Together, they gently tended to each bloom, Lucy humming as she worked. In that moment, Harold felt the warmth of community, the deep joy of connection, and the quiet power of being needed. He realized that taking care of himself wasn't just about survival, it was about creating moments like these, where love bloomed brighter than any flower. By embracing help and cherishing the small rituals, Harold found new purpose. He wasn't just living. He was thriving, guided by kindness, gratitude, and the wisdom of a life well loved.